Hi, this is Angela. Today we're talking about knees. By the time we've been on the planet for a few decades, we do have our fair share of wear and tear in our bodies. But for some reason, it feels like the knees seem to be ready to give out faster than the rest of us, which is a bit of a shame. Quite often it's because of a pre-existing injury, something that comes back to haunt us. But often it's just decades of just moving in a certain way that's not sympathetic to our knees and how they like to move. So in today's session, we're going back to basics a little bit, and I'm going to be going through what is optimal movement for our knees and what how should we be doing certain movements in order to get the most out of our knees, not put too much strain on them and not cause inflammation. Let's start with basics. Our knees are one of those joints that only goes in one direction, front and back. So we can straighten it and we can bend it, and usually it's just a forward and back movement, if you're looking at the front of our body. And that's quite different to, say, our hip joint, which can do circles, our ankle joint, which can also do more of a circular movement, our shoulders that can do a circular movement. So it is quite restricted in that respect. It can handle a little bit of sideways movement to an extent, and we have an infrastructure around our knees of muscles and ligaments that support us and help to restabilize us when we do that. But as we get older, after we've had a few injuries, a bit of wear and tear in that area, we're not as structurally sound and stable there as we would have been earlier on. Our body's not quite as forgiving. And that's when we start to feel that we're more vulnerable to injuries and pain as well. A big part of addressing this is actually being aware and conscious that any movement we do is in that forward and back movement. I like to think of a dotted line going from the center of my kneecap all the way down to the center of my foot. Both feet, so it's like these, the legs are two lines, and wherever we move, they're completely parallel to each other, and the knee does not go in or out, it stays right on top of that foot. So if we wanted to turn to the side, we turn the whole leg. The knee is still in line with that foot. We don't just turn the foot without the knee or vice versa. So just having that awareness is quite important. And this is something that you can think of in everyday things that you do, such as walking. Making sure that when you're walking, your feet are underneath, your legs are underneath your hips, like on two parallel lines, and your knees are in line with those feet. Your feet are pointing to the front as you're walking forward, so your knees are following those. When it comes to sitting down, making sure that when you're sitting down, those knees are pointing to the front, up and down. What I tend to see quite often is people coming in, and especially if they're very weak in the glutes, the knees sort of coming towards each other. So it's almost like a bowing in of the knees. And it tends to also be very common when you've got flat feet as well. Now, very often the issue here is that your glutes are not switching on, they're not strong enough, they're weak, and therefore the leg just rotates around. So by tightening those glutes, making them stronger, essentially we're just rotating the leg back into the right position so that knee is again in line with those toes. So that's why you'll find that in Pilates in particular, and in fitness, where we talk about building strong glutes, because it helps with our alignment, it helps with our leg health, and it helps with our balance as a result of that, because when you're in good alignment, you can balance as well. Another point also to bear in mind when it comes to knee health, one thing they don't like is being loaded. Now, when we do carry excess weight, our knees do feel the brunt of it more than other parts of our body. They're not quite as forgiving. But also in day-to-day movement, like doing a squat. I have a little bit of a running joke with some of my girlfriends that when they come to do a squat, and if they do this, I call it a granny squat, because they just don't want to stick their bum back, because that's just not the done thing. But when we actually do this sort of forward movement, we're actually, our upper body is directly on top of our knees, so we're putting a lot of unnecessary weight in this area. And that's why when we do a squat, we're pushing our bottom further back into that back position. What that does effectively is makes our heels take the most of the downward pressure. You should even be able to wiggle your toes so that you know that your heels are actually where the strength is. And that way it is a bit more forgiving to the knees. They don't have to carry so much of the weight because the heels are doing it. So really feeling that when we're going into a squat, or even sitting down and standing up, that you're really keeping the weight in the heels. You're making sure you're pushing your body back. Often it helps to use your arms forward to counterbalance you a little bit so that you can put more weight towards the back of your body as well. So what can we do about it? Look, another time I will do a video directly on exercises for this, but just a few really fundamental things that you can do is sitting and standing. Trying to do that with good form, making sure that those kneecaps are right on top of those toes, that you're not allowing those legs to bow in, and making sure that you're very comfortable with allowing your weight to go back. And as you get stronger, you feel more and more balanced doing this sort of move. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.